Okay, first on the agenda is review and approval of the minutes of the last meeting, which is February 25th. Thank you, Ken, for putting those together, as always. Were there any comments, edits?
I actually had a suggested addition to the cultural and historical report, because I thought that one of the things that really, first of all, I loved it, but secondly, there was one critical, I thought, vulnerability that should be kept in our records, and I noted, and that is that the Bolton historical records are not secured against fire damage. And I didn't know that. And that seems to me to be something that needs to be attended to in some way, and not simply pushed, to the back burner again and again until there's a flood or something.
Well, Marion needs support on that, because that has been noted for as long as I can remember.
25 years at least, maybe 30.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Let's get some new complaining voice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Are
so
you suggesting
Ken,
putting it in the minutes, though?
yes,
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm suggesting that Ken puts it in the minutes.
okay. Do I hear a motion to,
The
put that
next
in the
meeting,
minutes?
the next meeting paragraph in the minutes is incorrect and states it will be on April the 22nd.
Really?
A minor glitch, at least the one I have.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does
Oh, that
say April
happened.
22nd.
Good spot.
Yeah, it should have been March 25th.
Okay.
Valerie, you were going to say something?
Yes, obviously I wasn't at the meeting, but I do want to just add a sentence to the discussion of the Main Street mixed use developments. I think it would be helpful, perhaps let's say after the first sentence, to say that the proposal would require a zoning change and vote at town meeting. Just in case, I know probably no one's reading these minutes, but in case they are, just want to make sure that folks know that this is a proposal that would require quite a bit of discussion.
Right.
Did this come up at the meeting? It
Yeah,
it
required
did.
zoning change?
For
Okay,
sure.
Yeah, it did come up at the meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Bob raised that issue.
okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things that certainly to me came out of that meeting was that any comments that we have should be provided by individuals to the planning board, rather than by implication that we are some sort of regulatory board that is involved directly in the process.
Mhm.
So I think we need to really avoid reviewing proposed developments as a master planning committee. That's not our job, but as individuals and residents, it certainly is our job with the appropriate regulatory bodies. So I would recommend that we not entertain that in the future.
All right, shall I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Yes.
Yes, Ken, you've got those?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, although we don't have as many people as I had hoped, why don't we go through with the people that we have right now, what has transpired in the last month in the individual task groups? Kia? Thank you.
I was testing to see if I can use a reaction, like a thumb up like that.
And
Is
you
that
did, and it was
You
excellent.
did, it looked lovely, Kia.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything to say, though.
Oh,
Well,
I was
wow,
just
how
testing.
unusual. Okay,
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
okay, so why don't we start out in the usual order with climate change? Sharon, you want to give a brief update?
Sure.
You guys
Sure.
have been a fair amount at this point in terms of organization.
Yeah, Bob had called us into a couple extra meetings, and we're now working on data assignments, and we've not been able to have since we've had our data assignments, we've not been able to meet, and I've tried to use a doodle for the next meeting. And I think we're going to have to postpone that as well so that we can get everybody in. I will report, however, on some interesting data that I was able to get. So one of the things that I'm working on is the amount of solar that the town already has. And I thought that we wouldn't be able to get much data on that. But it turns out that we have quite a bit. I got in touch with Solar Flare that has just done, I can't remember how many, but about 8 or 9. And they gave me the kilowatt ratings for each of those. And I got in touch with New England Clean Energy and Mark, who is their CEO and a marvelous PR person. So his secretary or front desk person said that he would get me the kilowatts of all the installations that they have done in Bolton since they have begun. And Tony Jagodnik had a number that he had been able to get from the going through the building permit records one at a time in preparation for the Solarize program. And for those for which we do not have actual kilowatt sizes, we do have their the names and addresses of people. So we have, I think, I'm just guessing right now because I haven't added it up lately, we have at least something more than 178 installations in town for a significant amount of kilowatt hours being produced.
Good.
And that's I think very exciting. I didn't think it would be as easy to get this kind of cooperation from installers as it has been. But they were very happy to do that.
Okay. Hey, Mark, welcome.
There he is.
Mark?
Just one addition to that, one of the things that the group has done is taken the EPA GHG community inventory approach, which converts a whole slew of things that can affect greenhouse gas emissions, both directly, indirectly, et cetera, and are using that as the basis to collect all this information and develop, to the extent reasonable, a baseline of GHG emissions from which a goal could be developed for Bolton. And so that's, and by the way, the EPA document is absolutely superb. Very, very good document and saves a huge amount of time and provides a reasonably straightforward spreadsheet approach. Okay, Mary, cultural and historical. Mary, you're muted.
You're muted.
Now, no, she
Here
isn't.
I am.
There you go. There you go.
So we're going to be meeting next week, but I've been looking into other towns. So getting back to the how to protect our documents. So I'm looking at other towns and what they have for storage facilities. I know that Shirley installed a town vault several years ago to the cost of like around $300,000. So it's an expensive proposal, but it might be digitizing might be the way to go. So looking into all of that. Also looking at how to protect our cultural and historical sites with all of this future development. And right now, 3 of them are coming down at us fast and furious. And so I've done a little research on adaptive reuse, not real applicable, but you know, it's something that's worth considering. Also looking at what other towns are doing to protect their cultural and historical resources. So that's where we're at right now.
Mary, have you explored the Massachusetts Digitizing Organization?
I
Commonwealth?
I
Okay,
haven't. I've talked to Kelly about it.
Yeah, because Kelly has access to.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Digitization.
I've talked to her about the town books. And, but we haven't done any coordinating with Pam Powell on that.
okay. We just did the archives of Old Sturbridge Village with that.
Oh,
And
okay.
they're very, very fast, efficient, have terrific capability, both in terms of personnel and equipment. So check into that. It may be very useful.
Okay,
in
and so
developing.
you became a member? Sturbridge Village became
No,
a
I'm a
member?
trustee of Sturbridge,
Okay,
but I can put you in contact with the right people.
okay, so that, I'd appreciate that, thank you.
And by the way, Roland Oxenbaum is chairman of the Mass Library Commission, and Roland will know a great deal about that,
Well,
undoubtedly.
he's actually been pushing for this for a while now, the digitizing process, so, yeah, I know he's very bright and he can help us a lot.
Okay, good. Okay, we don't have anybody representing housing at this point. The good news is the housing report has just come out, so that is now formal and available, the housing production plan. And so I would recommend that everybody take a good look at that, and something that we will have to certainly use as a major piece of input to the master plan. Okay, land use, Kia.
Uh,
Yeah.
Sadly, I missed the meeting.
Okay, who else? Erica was there. Rebecca was there. Ken, are you there?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there was anything that specifically came out as actions, and I don't recall any off the top of my head. But Rebecca and I guess now Valerie are going to be working on making sure that the mapping resources that we have through GIS and stuff are available, and that we'll prepare the various maps that we're going to need to have for the plan. I don't
Okay.
recall anything other. I'd have to look at my notes, but I don't remember anything specific out of it. Just kind of talking about what's available and stuff.
Valerie, one thing that we need to talk about, you and I, with respect to municipal facilities as well as water and sewer, is the available town land and the degree to which it's constrained by wetlands in the vicinity of the Sawyer School, as well as over towards the cell tower on 495.
behind the senior center.
Right. That will be of interest for a number of reasons.
Yeah,
Since one of the things that I tripped over inadvertently in a conversation with DEP 2 days ago was that discussion about expansion of the municipal sewer system, and the fact that there inevitably is going to have to be expansion of the municipal administrative facilities. And they said, somewhat to my surprise, you have no idea how great the impact of COVID has been, and in terms of work styles and venues, and that a number of towns are actually thinking about reducing the amount, which I found astounding, but I think it's worthwhile looking into. I wasn't aware at all.
reducing the amount of municipal space.
Yeah, and that's, well, it was a combination of that and document management and administration using electronic systems. You know,
Well, there's
people are
no
getting-
question, the document management is huge in this
Yeah.
town.
So a lot of people, yeah, and a lot of people are getting rid of their paper. And that again, is something for historical. However, personally, I think it's really great to have real historical documentation.
Bob,
Trust,
you gonna mention about that land in back of the soccer field on Forbush Mill? Commonwealth and Mass land?
yeah, let me, very briefly, Rebecca mentioned to me that she had been looking at land that is currently owned by DCAMM down Forbush Mill Road, the old facilities. Is somebody,
I'm sorry, I would have to run over. It's a voicemail message. It'll stop in a minute.
oh, okay. In any case, there are wetlands violations by the state in Bolton on that land. And the state actually brought up the possibility of transferring that land through sale or gift or whatever to Bolton. And what's interesting, it's a little piece of land. I don't want to get into details, but it's up off Forbush Mill Road. There is a pond in it with a dam, and that has something to do with the wetlands violations up there. but it is sitting directly on top of one of the most productive aquifers, if not the most productive aquifer in the town. So were we to acquire that land, it would be very, very useful, and it is not restricted as conservation land. So what we had challenges with in terms of looking, and I can talk about that, looking for land on which we could put a significant public water supply, that might very well be something we should be looking at. And incidentally, that is in the vicinity of the public water supply expansion that Lancaster just did. It's right on the Bolton border, right there. So enough said.
Could you also have, check out the Paul Slade landlocked land?
That's
behind? Because that's also very wet, but also I don't know if it would be a well, if the well at Sawyer ever had to be moved to put a building where the Sawyer, I mean, I think Paul Slade has indicated he is not interested in keeping that piece of property. And I think because it abuts town land, we should be looking at it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think we
that-
already are, yeah.
where, yeah, that whole area, and
Yeah,
I'm
that
sorry, I
whole
should have
area
said
we're
that.
looking at.
It's not just town land, but the land that's interspersed privately among those pieces,
Yes,
town
yeah.
parcels. But you make a good point in that land is to a large degree not buildable, but you can still put wells there.
Right,
So-
and can you put solar panels there? Can you
I-
put, I mean, there's a lot of uses of things that the town's gonna need, and yeah, I mean.
It's worth exploring,
It's
although
worth exploring.
solar over wetlands is an interesting challenge that I've also gone through recently.
Well, that, I'm interested, I wonder how much of that is wetlands.
Well, to be determined.
Where is this third parcel? You called it the Paul Slate
And
land?
then if, on the back, if you go straight back with the Bolton Office Park on one side and the senior center on the other side, you go back that road, if you keep on going back towards the cell tower, the town land borders on land owned by some of us laughing refer to as the Slade compound. His father, when he bought land in this town, bought the whole back piece, and Paul is one of the sons, and he owns a bunch of property back there, and his brother owns some property back there also. So if you look, it'll come up as owned by one of the Slades.
I'll give you the property card if you
Oh,
want.
she'll find it. No, I mean, it's not hard to find. You just go on it's easy to look at. But it's Paul Slade and Chris Slade.
Okay, Penny, you've already talked about municipal services and facilities, and that's an ongoing thing. But I think one of the most important things we can do is make sure that we have not only an inventory of the existing facilities, but as you're doing, determining what the growth would look like. And case in point, DPW is in a horribly small lot, inappropriately located. And Randy has already definitely endorsed looking for better and
And
more
also,
land.
the owner of that property that came to see us, what I refer to as the Dunkin' Donuts property.
Yep.
Because Randy, he abuts Randy, the DPW. Randy just asked if by some chance there was a change, would he be interested in that property? And he said, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So,
I can't imagine developing a residential area right up against the back of a public works
yeah,
truck.
it just doesn't do much
storage
for
area.
us.
With issues, shall we say.
Let me make sure I understand which pronouns you were using, Penny. Is
Pardon
the he in this case that Randy would be interested in acquiring the guy's property? Or
No,
the
no, no,
guy?
no, no.
Vice versa.
Then if
No,
Randy
that's down.
wanted to
Okay, that's what I
move
thought.
the DPW,
That's what I thought.
yeah, and one of the things we talked about that we're just exploring is how much land we have at the dump. I'm sorry, the transfer station. And whether if you rearranged it, could you put the DPW up there along with the transfer station? So it's just, we're just looking at boundaries at this point and where you can build and where you can't build and, see if there's a possibility. We're just looking at land at this point.
But to Kia's point, the approach that we're taking is to first of all identify all of the town land that it's owned in Bolton.
Exactly.
and whether there are limitations to it, whether, it's prime land for Parks and Rec, whether it's restricted as conservation land, what the wetlands are. And
Mhm.
once we've taken a look at that from a flat paper look, as it were, then start taking a look at the topography of those various parcels to determine the appropriateness for potential use as town facilities or locating town facilities. So it's a two-step process, but we need to have the first step sorted out right away so that we know what we've got and then can start thinking in terms of proximity, infrastructure, et cetera. And then, as we did with the Taggart land, take a look at what it would take to do anything on it in terms of any kind of
Just
structures, access, et cetera. Okay, so if you folks can interface with Valerie and Rebecca on that and make sure that we have those base maps that allow us to make any kind of assessment, that would be great. Okay. Ed, any update on open space and rec?
Well,
Well, I know one of your updates.
it's been difficult to almost separate day-to-day issues in Parks and Rec with master planning, honestly. The amount of work lately is insane, even with a coordinator. What's really hit us is this vegetation management planning. Rebecca has wanted us to go through every park we own and kind of revisit all the wetlands filings and basically resubmit all the paperwork and go over the orders and conditions. And I spent part of the day with her. I spent part of the day down in Forbush. We went to Memorial Field. Just a lot of work lately and just really unplanned and frankly. Anyway, we'll get through it somehow or other. I have approached the sports teams for some statement about their future needs. I said, look out 20 years. Could you imagine the growth of Bolton and what you folks would need for fields? I honestly, at the moment, have gotten some answers. I haven't really compiled them, but at least there's been some feedback on what their needs are. Kind of related somewhat to the vegetation management plan and so on. The soccer field at Forbush is facing a bit of a crisis, I guess, because of the amount of new registrations due to COVID. And what I've certainly discovered is just an overflow almost in every area. I'm on a Mount Wachusett committee, and apparently they're just overwhelmed there with parking, people parking in, people's homes, driveways, and so on. They've never seen so much use. And so apparently soccer is seeing quite a lot of new registrations. The Forbush Mill Road was re-signed last year to prevent parking from the soccer field down to the town line for safety issues. And the last word I had was that Chief Nelson was not really sympathetic to overflow parking. It was kind of a done deal, and he doesn't want to see cars on the road. So I've met with the soccer people, and Bob, it's fascinating that you mentioned that land by the DCAM, the DCAM. I'm approaching them as well on the other side. So we might want to have a coordinated effort here. I asked them last year if we could possibly expand the parking lot of soccer into that unused, I call it bean field. There'd been some low crop there for a number of years, and it's been abandoned. And that goes from the soccer field to the town line, to see if that could possibly be filled in. I found some alternatives by, I think, being able to go down that thing called Sand Road, which does lead over to the so-called RFK buildings and so on. I think there can be enough parking in there for our soccer people. So that's what I've spent a lot of time on recently, is helping parking with the soccer. But clearly soccer is growing, and we talked today, in fact, what would it take for the town to possibly lease or purchase that so-called bean field on the other side of their parking lot to provide A, more parking, and B, probably more playing space. as that area grows. So it's pretty constrained due to wetlands and the stream and so on. But if we could get some access down there, that would be nice. I did send a letter to Don Lowe asking some questions about that. And my sense is that the best we could hope for would probably be some kind of a lease with that DCAM. He says it's difficult to sell property like that without the act of legislature, and it would allow others to bid on it. So a lease with Bolton for recreation use probably would be our best bet. So I'm working on that right now to see where that can go. So
Have
that's
you got an idea based on projections on what the amount of area that you're looking at would be?
Well, it certainly would include that bean field, so to speak, that unused agricultural field down to the town line. That would help a lot. And then the question is, where else could we ever go? The Bolton Flats land in front of my house, I've contacted the state, and that used to be a big open field, but I often wondered if community gardens could go in there. My contact at the state has said no, they have no interest in restoring that field. That was once, big, wide open cornfield. They are letting it go back to nature, and that's their intention. They do not want to surrender that or change it from what's happened in recent years. So at the moment, I don't have any other place to put soccer or anything. Memorial Field, they feel pretty confident with what they have right now. And in fact, we're dealing with this thing called Triple Play, which turns out to be a private effort out of Clinton that wants to use our fields. And I have a feeling we're almost giving away the use of that space. So given that that's a commercial entity that the town is receiving money for, if Bolton had to expand baseball, they would appear at the moment to have adequate space. I think the wetland issue can be dealt with reasonably down in Memorial Field as well.
But again, the baseline wetland is something we need to have that conversation.
And that's what we're dealing with right now with this vegetation management. We walked it today with Rebecca and got her comments on what she's comfortable with in terms of mowing and fertilizing and pesticides. Yep.
When do you think you're going to get input from the various sports organizations on?
So I've actually got that now. I
projections?
just need to compile that. That's
Okay,
quite
good.
honestly. So this vegetation management thing has just kind of knocked my socks off in terms of a totally, really unexpected and much more complicated effort than I would have thought. I kind of hoped it was almost coming out of the Concom first, and then we review it. It seems to be the opposite. We're supposed to do the work, and then Concom reviews it.
Okay,
Yeah. Wow.
okay. Ken, population demographics, you had identified, and Brian had as well, the timing for the vintage 2020 US Census information. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I haven't read the whole thing, but the Census Bureau announced that the first data is going to come out in September. So if we want to use any new stuff, it wouldn't be that soon, but I guess if our were next year, then it would be soon enough to begin to process some of that into our plan. That's all I really know about it at this point.
Yeah, they have a huge matrix on their website, and basically it's a rolling matrix. They're going to release various types of census information for various areas and demographics on a rolling schedule. So I think we need to take a look at that. We had that conversation with regard to housing last week with Stasha, and basically put her onto that. But I think we need to, as a group, establish the basis for moving forward as what the current baseline status is right now. So can you talk to Brian and see if you can't come up with a communique to the rest of the team?
Sure.
Appreciate that. Okay, public outreach and communication. Annie, Abby,
Well, we're working with Brian and Valerie are working and talking to MAPC about the public outreach and the forums, and Kia's sort of working on it too when she has time. And, we're just waiting. We're basically waiting at this point, aren't we, for MAPC to get back to us? Or where are we in that one?
Brian and Valerie and I had a conversation about having a public forum or multiple public forums based on to some degree what Dedham has done in the past, and how we would structure that. So we'll have a conversation, I believe, again on Monday, Valerie,
That's right.
Monday morning, bright and early. Good way to start the week.
Yep.
And we have a meeting on Tuesday, the 30th, yeah, with Public Outreach and Communications at 3:30 in the afternoon. Let's see, I believe I put out the Zoom notice, so I will extend that to Valerie. Do you think you could
Great.
join that?
I believe so. I can, I don't have my calendar open right now,
Okay.
but I'll absolutely try to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be very useful because we really did need to get going, but we need to be very organized in our get going
Absolutely.
when we do anything like this. And I think we wanted to get our heads together about what we would like to do and what the role and need for input from MAPC is before we have another conversation with Ralph Wilmer or anybody else over there. So that's where we stand there. Schools, Penny,
Schools aren't anywhere, and I don't expect it to be until end of May, June. They're all, the high school's going back, the grade school's going back. I think they're gonna be so overwhelmed that no one's talking to anybody. And with the change in the administration, I think you're gonna find we're not gonna have anything, we're not gonna be able to start till June at the earliest.
What are the schedules like? I'm seeing buses all lined up at like 10:20 in the morning. Are they having very short sessions?
Abby, you've got partial going back at the high school?
Yeah, the hybrid students, they go in twice a week only for half of the day. So they leave like right before lunch at like 11:15 and then they do the rest of the day from home.
Okay,
But they only go in twice.
all right. Thank you.
But my question is, how are kids who, I mean, if you go back full time the end of April, as you were mentioning, I gather there is the option to stay home to,
Yeah. And so I
how
think
are they
right-
going to manage that? How's the teacher going to?
that's a great question. I don't think anybody really knows the answer because in the letter they sent us, I think it said that they can't really guarantee if we're going to have the same teachers or the same classes and whatnot because of like, I guess we would have to be on Zoom while in the class kind of, but I think definitely the people at home would be at a disadvantage. So
I think they're going to have their hands full. I was up there walking.
they already
the track.
do. They do with the mascot change and like the new administration, everything going on. They have everybody's coming at them. So
There were all the teachers were up there this morning, 8 o'clock, when I was walking the track in the mist, and everybody was there.
Well, in terms of projections and space use, one upside that we have, I believe, is that we're going to have a lot of that information generated by the Neshoba Regional High School building committee. And so by the middle of the year, they will have had to start putting that together. And Brian has reached agreement with them that anything they develop comes to us as well. And in order to develop it, they're going to have a pretty good perspective on the age and student population demographics of the three towns at the elementary school level in order to look at where it's going with the high school. So we will have an advantage to some degree there.
And we do, I mean, I do have the numbers of 0 through 5 for Bolton as of 6 months ago. So,
Yeah, and one thing that this whole situation has brought up that we really haven't addressed formally and isn't in any group's purview at the moment is the whole business of emergency planning for pandemics. Because this
well,
is just,
that's under municipal services. It's under
Oh,
my
thank you,
list
Penny.
of my growing municipal. I have municipal services, Valerie. And I said to Robert tonight that my list seems to be growing exponentially. So at some point, we need to have a conversation about
Right.
the growth of the things that are on my list. And one of them is on there is emergency services.
well, and that's another
Or
thing
the
that
lack
turned
of.
up. Yeah, we turned up the fact that Bolton does not have an emergency plan at all.
Well, no, that's not quite true. I got a call from Bumper and he said that in 2005, maybe, there was one filed with the state and he was trying to get his hands on it for me. but obviously hasn't been terribly successful. But anyhow, there was one, but there isn't an updated one certainly right now.
Well,
And
even at the 2005 ought to be at least 4 tests that I know about.
And I was talking to, I had a long talk. Do you guys remember Jody? Used to
Oh,
be
yeah.
town administrator. I have a
West-
long
town of
talk with
Westford.
Jody, and Westford, she's the town manager in Westford right now, and
Right.
they're in the process of updating their emergency management plan. So she sent me copies of what they're doing. So it's really interesting. So there are lots of pieces to this.
But you
Well,
don't
I
have to
mean-
start from scratch at all.
No, you don't. Absolutely
There are
not.
templates all over the place and a lot of thinking and
Yeah.
consulting available.
Well, did she remember if we had submitted one then?
Pardon me?
She was in office here in 2005. Does she remember submitting it?
I didn't ask her about that, but apparently it was submitted. According to
No, I mean,
Bumper, it was
I
submitted.
remember something like that getting done. I
Yeah,
remember that we had a committee and
yeah.
things of that
But,
sort. So,
Then it sort of went away. So I've got lots of examples of what we should be looking for, and at some point in the next month or so, now I've got all my shots. I'm gonna try to sit down with Jeff and Bumper and, start the sort of thinking process of where they are. And because basically it's just the two of them right now.
Well, and a lot has changed. I mean, that's
Valerie's,
one thing.
Bob, Valerie's trying to talk.
Okay.
You need to raise your hand or out there.
Sorry.
There you go.
I was just going to say that, I mean, for the purposes of the master plan, it may just be a recommendation that we,
Set
that
one
we
up.
Oh, it
then.
will be.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do it.
So,
We're not going to do it.
okay, good. I
no,
just want to
we're
make sure that we
definitely not
don't,
doing
that
it.
we're not, okay.
No, there was never the thought of. But
Well,
it'd be
you were-
nice to at least
Okay.
have some background for these guys to start and a place to start.
Okay, well, just as we think about all the different tasks on your plate, we might want to make sure that we're highlighting those that, we can use as recommendations only.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this was definitely a recommendation. It wouldn't be,
Okay,
no
Good.
question.
Valerie, actually, that's mostly the case.
okay.
We'll make recommendations and then
If
we'll
we're
go
ever
sit
gonna
on
finish
people to get it done.
But that one was on with COVID and climate change and so forth. It's pretty important to have that and not to make the first activity in an emergency. Okay. Where are we? The survey, I don't think we need the man who is responsible for that at the moment in the advisory committee. I'm sure Brian will get back to us on any thoughts he has on where that should go, could go, and recommendations made in that regard. Transportation infrastructure, Mr. Troop or
defer
Mary.
to Mary on this.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So we are looking into right now a sub-regional COA ride service pilot that Bolton COA is interested in being involved in, and it's going to involve regionalized dispatch service. So there's a meeting next week with the stakeholders. So we're just keeping informed on this and seeing where it's going to go. Also looking at the impact on e-commerce on our roadways, because MAPC just put out a report on it. What we're looking at in terms of vehicles on our roadways, all of these Amazon trucks and other e-commerce businesses. So that's something that we're looking into. And the other thing, and Sharon, I thought you'd be interested, we probably should work on this, but the New York Times had an interesting article on electric cars. And looking out 15 to 20 years out, this article reports that by 2035, a quarter of the new sales will be electric vehicles, but only 13% of them will be on our roadways. And that because gasoline fueled cars are being built for longevity, they're looking at by 2050, the majority of vehicles on the road will still be gas cars that
Hmm.
run on gas.
Mhm.
The other thing that I'm looking at is complete streets, and Public Ways met with Don Lowe, and we talked about it with Randy last night at our meeting on where the town is right now. And basically the town doesn't have the manpower to address it, but I'm looking at other towns, surrounding towns that have policies, and how many of those are receiving grants through the state Complete Streets program. And, you know, if we're missing out, and how long these grants are going to be available for, because I really see that this is the wave of the future, is that roadways for all users, and that how the town is going to be accommodating for them.
And just
Mary,
to
does that
clarify what
mean,
Mary said about the COA and the van,
Uh-huh.
this is really just a change. The MART van is pretty much not changing. It's how it's scheduled and how we cross schedule with other towns if we
Right.
have people that are going to the same place. But it's more a scheduling issue than anything else.
Right, but you could have a situation where a van from, say, Lancaster is going to Worcester to a hospital, and a Bolton resident could take advantage of that.
Well, and
So-
vice versa, because Lancaster doesn't go to Worcester.
Yeah.
And we do. So it's basically a joint scheduling and how it would work.
Right.
Hey, Mary, and this impacts Penny as well. Every day I look out my window over Main Street and I see a long line of yellow. And the yellow are buses that contain nothing but the driver.
Right.
And I think we really need to look into that, you know, running vehicles like that are virtually empty. And all I
Going
hear
on for a
is,
long time.
well, we got to do that. It's regulation. Well, progress is not made through adhering to existing regulations.
Right.
It's made through thinking about what the real need is and figuring out how to work within the regulations and meet the need, or change the regulations. So I think it'd be interesting to get statistics on that and what the rationale is for all those empty buses.
And they're expensive. They're
They're
very
very
expensive. They can really contribute to the bottom line on the budget.
But if you can look into some, I don't know where one would get the statistics for that in terms of ridership.
The
Right, I think-
region, because they have to schedule it and the bus companies have to schedule it.
So if you could look, you know, just put that in your little parking lot and
Whose parking lot? Mary's or mine?
Mary's,
I
yeah.
can look
Uh-huh.
into that. So Bob, these buses you're talking about, are they COA buses, or are they?
No,
school
no, no,
I don't
no,
know.
they're school buses. See, what
Big yellow
happens
school
is,
buses.
Yeah,
the town of Stowe, having been through this when I was the treasurer, regional treasurer, this town says I have X number of kids and you need to pick them up. The state says you have the ability to pick them up, even though 95% of the time, one kid is going to drive his car, but he may need it only one time. So anyhow, they schedule those buses and end up only picking up 10 kids instead of the 30 kids that they would normally put on a bus. I'm sure it's changed since I was there, but it's definitely state mandated. So we have to look into the state mandate on how you schedule buses. I mean, if you think back 25 years, there may have been 15 students parking spaces because they were allowed to get a parking space if they were going to a job afterwards.
Mhm.
Now every kid in the world has a car to drive to school in.
Right.
So those are kids who are not taking the buses, but the buses are still there because they are legally obligated to go down their road. And there may be one kid at the end of the road. And also they cover a lot of territory. So there are a lot of pieces to this, but the question is, do you need to drive those huge buses when you're
No.
only putting 5 kids on?
right,
Yep.
right.
right,
So
Okay, but I don't-
there are a lot
Yeah.
of pieces to this. It's not a simple,
Yeah,
it's not
don't
simple.
solve the problem now, but let's find out what the basic statistics
Yeah,
are.
but there are,
and whether
it's
a
definitely
solvable
mandated
problem,
by the state.
you know, within our purview.
Mhm.
right, the state does not require a bus of a particular size.
Okay, so we'll,
Only the, yeah, so I think that's one of the things in terms of conservation, that we need to know, can we renegotiate contracts for smaller vehicles? Something in that order.
yeah, makes perfect sense. So if we
And I
can
think
find
the
out what
one
the
person you
requirement
want
is,
to
that's
talk to,
good.
Mary, is the business manager.
Okay,
That's who
What-
drives it.
I want to ask a question about what we can ask of town employees. So we have asked whether or not the tax collector could tell us the number of electric or hybrid vehicles, and she said no.
Oh, wait. She didn't, I mean, she said no, but she
Right.
said it's because she doesn't have the data.
Right.
It's from the RMV, and
Yeah.
the software person that gives her the data is not able to give us any information.
Right, I know what we
Hey,
could,
Mary?
but there is a solution to that. But you want to jump in, Mary?
Yeah, Sharon, I sent you and Bob the data from the registry on the number of electric vehicles in Bolton. Didn't I?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
I don't
Okay.
think no, I didn't get it.
No.
Okay, I contacted the registry, so I have the numbers and I'll dig that up, who I sent it to, and forward it to you.
Ah, okay. Because there was just recently a really lively discussion about electric vehicles versus hybrid vehicles, and it occurred to me that all we would have to do is to give her the names, the vehicle, like what is it, a Nissan Leaf, right? Give her the list of names and she
It's
would be
not
able
quite that simple, Sharon.
Well, I hate to cut this off, but I think the best solution is to explain to them what you're looking for and see what they can do about giving it to you in one way or another, and what you need to give to them in order to accommodate
Yeah.
their
okay.
ability to.
Or as Mary says, go through the registry. I think Mary's got the right
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
Yep.
I'll find that information. I'll
Okay,
Right, but it needs not just electric, you need hybrid as well.
Okay.
Right.
okay. I think that about covers it. Except for water and sewer. And since I'm about to run through it.
Did we skip, economic development?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gone nowhere.
There's nothing.
Nothing's, right now it's on hold.
Okay,
And you and I probably ought to talk about that as well.
yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
EDC ought to be heavily involved in that. And there really hasn't been, other than EDC asking for information on where we were with respect to town water and sewer. We haven't seen any of that. What frankly I would like from EDC is what their projection is and the types of businesses that they would like to see and where within the existing business zoned areas. And then we can use that as a mechanism to start thinking about what the infrastructure requirements are in order to make that work. And whether the town is going to provide them. I think that's the other issue. Is the town capable of it, and does it make financial and overall tax sense? So, anyway, I got a lot of questions on that. Okay, let me quickly.
Val, you're going to be living with Mr. Romer for a while.
Okay, can I share my screen? Can you let me share my screen, Valerie?
I think you're able to, are you not?
Yes, indeed, I can.
Okay.
I believe it's may I, Robert.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get a slideshow going here. You see that?
Yep.
Okay, this is basically the status report where we are right now. The group, it consists of Mark, who is the real master plan liaison, Barry, Kevin O'Brien, who is a volunteer on the group, me, Chris Slade, who is a member of the Board of Health, and more recently, Randy Hegland, the DPW director, who has provided a great deal of information recently. The whole purpose of the task group at this, whoops, let me go backwards here, hold on. The purpose is to take a look at where things are with respect to the current status and future needs, and that's perfectly consistent with what everybody else is doing. looking at on-site and off-site options for potable water sources, as well as sewage treatment and disposal. And then look at opportunities for improved emergency and climate change resiliency. And we've had that discussion already on a fairly detailed level with regard initially to the Taggart property, but we will need to talk to others about that. The group interfaces with most of the rest of the master plan organization. Cultural and historical, certainly, for water and sewer, particularly if we're talking about community centers and that kind of issue. Municipal services, clearly, anticipated needs for new administrative buildings, as well as the DPW 2 lines below. Climate change for emergencies. We've had discussions, as I'll mention later, with the fire department, among others, and their concern. The projection and water sewer needs for the Neshoba Regional School District, specifically our schools, Emerson and Florence Sawyer, and then the EDC. As I just mentioned, we need to have projections on what their interest is, where it is, and the types of buildings and types of services that they anticipate would be put in place. What we've done today is we've taken a look at the aquifers in town, as well as a lot of the well information. We've gotten some anecdotal, actually quite a bit of anecdotal data on well changes and failures. There was a lot of discussion in the beginning about, gee, a lot of Bolton wells have failed. And the basis for that conversation was that new wells are being drilled or wells are being drilled deeper. And it turns out that's not really the case. The case is that wells are being drilled deeper in order to have a larger reserve in the well when there are peak times needed in the house or in the business. So it doesn't look like we have a lot of problems with that. And particularly, seemingly almost no problems in terms of groundwater elevations. But again, we don't have a lot of information on that right now and are looking for more. Emergency water supply. The chief, Jeff Legendre, is interested in that, obviously, particularly in periods of drought, and also interested in perhaps a centralized location for public water supply in the case of an emergency. Although we have a very different climate, the folks in Texas have recently discovered how important it is to have at least one central location to get a substantial amount of potable water, even if you have to bring your buckets over or your bottles over or your jugs over to get it. So that's of interest as well. And the two may be closely related or overlap, one and the same. We're looking at the effort and cost for the public water system. Good information because Lancaster just did it. We've been talking to Scott Miller, who was the engineer responsible for that. And then look at potential zoning implications. That's one of the issues that's been brought up, that once you have started bringing centralized water and sewer, the justification for large lot zoning semi-disappears. Now, it doesn't disappear, but what can happen is there can be a challenge, a legal challenge to zoning, lot size, based on the fact that there's no longer an environmental need for lots of that size. And that goes back to the federal study, the 208 water quality study that was done many years ago, in which Bolton came out on top of Worcester County, basically under an MRPC study that was done because of our large lot size. We have a lot of information from the state. This is a map showing just a portion, and it's much more detailed when you focus in on it, of the aquifers in Bolton. The darker the green, the higher the yield of the aquifer. And you can see that in addition to the aquifer that hopefully we all know about, in Bolton Flats and Still River. We have one over in the northeast portion of the town along 117. And we have one close to the intersection of 495 and 117. Also, obviously, a wet area down there that you can see. The fire department has done an enormous amount of work, I'm sure, as everybody has seen, in putting in and identifying cisterns and water holes. And this is the fire department map, for which there is also a very clear database and instructions and yields and all the rest of it, of all the fire water sources within Bolton. In addition to this, there are agreements with neighboring towns that do have public water supplies that, with permission, our fire department can tie into their hydrants. The point, however, has been made that in drought situations, we have 2 ponds. That's it, folks. And this year we got kind of close. If you noticed, we had a lot of empty fire ponds floating around. So this is the rationale for starting to look more seriously at a major fire water and emergency water supply. Oops. This, incidentally, is just a tiny piece of the state well data for all of the wells going back to the 1960s in Bolton. So it gives you a very substantial amount of information. And Rebecca kindly was able to take this and overlay it based on the GIS locations on a GIS map. And that's where that map 2 slides before came from.
Bob, you had
Yes.
earlier said something about the wells needing to be, drilled deeper. Is there the sense that there is adequate capacity in the town for all the development that, we're experiencing? I've always been curious about that there was, groundwater capacity. And was there a point at which development has to be, looked on with great concern for what the water needs are for those additional houses? Do we
Well, it
seem to
depends.
have an unlimited amount of water?
No, it depends, first of all, where you are. If you're anywhere near one of those aquifers, they're gravel aquifers. There's a very large amount of water, to the extent that along Route 110, as you look over to Still River, a number of the test wells that were drilled there over the past 30 years, several of them have actually been artesian. When they opened up the well, water came out and it didn't need to be pumped, and it came out in vast rates. But it's a good question, and it's a very difficult question to answer.
Right.
First of all, with gravel wells, it's relatively straightforward to do a drawdown of a test well and determine roughly what you've got in terms of potential yield for that area of the aquifer. Where it gets really dicey is in hard rock wells, which there are a very large number of hard rock wells in Bolton. And the issue there is that there's not what you would call a water table in the traditional sense. It's not a nice, neat water table. It's basically cracks in the rock that are being filled by water. The 2 issues are minerals and the short-term demand on a well. Minerals are filling up the cracks in the wells, and although it's traditionally used in terms of gas generation, you actually have to go in and frack the wells. You actually have to go in and put high pressure in the wells and open up those cracks to basically reestablish water into the well. So that's one issue. The second one is short-term demand. And that's the reason that wells are being drilled to incredibly deep levels, not unknown to go to 600 feet.
Well, Bob,
And
is
that's
that
not-
column J? Is that
I'm sorry?
column J?
Yeah. And
Holy cow.
that's not because of the water table. Notice, if you move over a couple columns, notice the water level's right up there, right?
Okay. So
Okay,
what's
but
going on?
So the reason is that instead of putting a water tank beside your house into which you pump water continuously at the yield rate of your well, and then when you want to water your lawn or take a shower or do whatever, fill your swimming pool, I hope not, then you want to have a large reservoir. And that, as you go from your water table at 40 feet down to 665 feet in an 8-inch hole, the amount of reservoir in that hole is phenomenal.
Good God.
And so the wells are being drilled very deep in order to accommodate that reservoir.
I
And
see.
so the initial reaction was, holy smokes, do we have to drill that far to get water now? The answer is no.
And what is K then? Column K?
Uh, that is the depth at, I believe that was the depth that they drilled down to hit water. And then the water level in column L is the normal, stable water table.
Okay.
Is that, we have an interesting, we're up on a ridge and we have what I guess you called it a rock well.
Yep.
And we were concerned when Northwoods was going in because we literally draw our water from free water that has dribbled down from the surface. Right, we're not in an aquifer. We're getting that water that's at that level, and I'm surprised that you have all this information because we could not find the data. Who is it that used to drill all the wells in town?
Sullivan?
Sullivan.
One
Yeah.
Sullivan or another.
Yes, right. Right. And apparently when our well was drilled, they were keeping their records on 3x5 cards,
Right.
which had disappeared by the time we were trying to argue that we would like some restrictions on Northwoods people watering their lawns, because at one point our well had gone dry on us.
Right.
And we couldn't do it because we couldn't get the information on our well.
Well, all the well information for a very, very long period of time is available on the state well site. And that's where that table came from.
Ah, okay.
So it's,
So we're there. We just
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
know where to look.
Yeah.
Bob, did that include the famous test wells on August Lane for the city of Leominster? That unusual attempt by Leominster to tap water in Bolton Flats? Do you know about that one?
That's interesting. I'd like to talk to you more about that
Okay,
because,
we don't have to belabor it now. Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
I really do want it. We've been looking for that. And
Understand.
we've been looking for even the source.
Right.
But
Okay.
yeah, thank you. I'd
Yep.
love to talk about that.
Yep.
Okay. Let me just back off a little bit. One of the things that Mark came up with is what the implications are of lawn irrigation. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think I've given an overview in the past. Pretty much, if you're, see, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but if you water roughly, I think, a quarter acre, about 10,000 square feet, once a week throughout the course of the summer, it's the same as adding at least one more house. It's the equivalent of the water use for an additional house.
Right. Right.
I think we put that presentation on the website, didn't we?
Yeah, it's I'm not sure it's on the website. It's definitely in Dropbox.
It's in Dropbox. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that would be worthwhile revisiting, because it was staggering to me that much water and what it takes when you just calculate if the recommended rate is an inch per day on your lawn of water, and then you calculate what an inch over a quarter acre is. It's horrifying.
Right.
And so one of the things that might be recommended is let's look into either recommended or required limitations on residential irrigation. And that's very easy to do. You stop watering your lawn all the time and you water your shrubs, which are very expensive. and you water your gardens using drip irrigation. In any case, something to be explored further, but the amount of water that goes into residential irrigation is pretty amazing.
Another suggestion there too is that there are different grasses
Yep.
that you can plant that don't require watering.
Yep.
And also, one of the things I think that Bolton Local will be looking at is healthy lawns. Lawns themselves can become carbon sinks, but not if they are fed with fertilizers.
Yep.
That removes their functionality as carbon sinks. So that's where I think the climate action people would be interested in working here with this group on recommendations.
Okay, and again, start with a baseline statistic. What are the implications, and then what can be done to improve them? Okay, sewer. We've looked at on-site disposal options, basically sewer systems, septic systems, and they're getting better and better. We have gotten the Board of Health to put up a using and maintaining your septic system write-up on their website. And that's critically important because from a financial point of view, if your septic system fails, it's a very expensive replacement. But it's relatively easy to maintain your septic system by pumping it on a 2 or 3 year basis, and then making sure that certain things don't get into it, like grease, like kitchen grinders, etc. And then we've looked at the anecdotal. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and especially not your water conditioners.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is happens a lot,
Yeah.
and will kill a septic system in a very short period of time. Looked at the anecdotal information on town center systems. Chris Slade has been very important in this. And what has been interesting is that where it was a real problem 10 years ago, it has become much less of a problem as a result of homes being sold and having to upgrade to meet Title V requirements. But perhaps the most important thing is that the technology has improved very dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years. And case in point, and the real poster child for this is the house 725 Main Street, adjacent to the town common, the little house there, which
Bambi's
sits
old house.
right. It sits on a lot of 1.12 acres, and it now has a perfectly acceptable Title V septic system. So times have changed. We've looked at a centralized water system and town center and working with the DPW, but we do need more information on where, and that would be municipal services as well as economic development committee. Good news is that DPW in the last 2 weeks has awarded a contract to an engineering firm to assess the current condition of our wastewater treatment facility behind Sawyer School. And they're going to have, first of all, the results out of that evaluation in probably the next 45 days. But there is part 2 to that effort, and that is to take a look at the expected need for the town of a centralized town center sewage system following that. And that's expected in the next 3.5 to 4 months. So we will have, even though we would recommend it, it's kind of landed in our lap to some degree, that we will have an engineering review of what the capability of that system is and what might need to happen in order to expand it into a sewer district in town center.
So Bob,
What would be the implications of having that? That sounds significant. I mean, if you make a town center sewer district, are we talking about it in terms of development, business development?
Yeah, but that's part of it. It's also part of more municipal facilities. And if you talk to the DEP, which I have a couple of times very recently, they are very enthusiastic about getting rid of on-site septic systems from an environmental perspective. They would much prefer a centralized system. So the one implication, again, is potential challenges to our zoning.
Okay.
Which we've got to be careful about, but I think we need to be careful about it. We need to talk to town council. We need to understand case law. And we need to make sure that we understand that as we move forward into doing an assessment. And this team is not going to do the assessment. We will certainly recommend it and provide some basis for it. So,
Look, Bob?
Yeah.
Where could we fit into that possible assessment, the ability to use the current mound for athletics and recreation? It gets informally used, but I've always been concerned as to how sensitive is that. I guess it's a leach field. Am I right?
yeah, the one out behind Sawyer School.
Right, and with the pump house, at the edge of the field, we've had Cub Scouts out there and so on. I would like to know how safe or or proper it is to possibly conduct, soccer on that leach field.
Well,
Is there
we
some
can
way
talk to Wright Price about that, and we can talk to DEP about that.
Okay,
But my knee-jerk reaction is there's really no problem at all.
Yeah, when
But
we put
again,
it in, we intentionally had them make it big enough to be at least a practice lacrosse field.
Yep.
okay.
So I don't think
So-
there's a problem with that.
It
Yeah.
looked as if it could use a little smoothing out and so on. So I'm just kind of curious,
That could well be.
who do I go for an authoritative answer to say, yeah, we could put a little more fill in here and and smooth it out and maybe plant some grass and so on. So
Well,
if you're
Rob,
doing
okay.
an assessment, that sounds great.
Yeah, and that conversation should occur and occur through us with Randy Hagelin and Rob Frieswick. Rob's
Okay.
responsible for maintenance at the schools.
All right, thank you.
Okay, but yeah, that's a good point. I mean, multi-use, great.
It's a
And
beautiful
Rob's
field.
really good to work with.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's really good. So's Randy.
Okay, so we've taken a good look at the wastewater treatment system that seems to escape everybody's understanding. And these are the numbers. These are the real numbers. It's as Ed just described, it's the actual wastewater treatment facility is a biomembrane facility. It has biological action, but it also has a reverse osmosis membrane to really clean it up before it goes into a leach field behind the wastewater treatment facility. As Ed described, it's out in the field there. The design capacity is 38,000 gallons per day, and that's permitted, and the permit is about to be renewed. Interesting, the design input, and this, I need to be very clear about this. There is a difference between a design input and an actual inflow. The design input is based on the number of bedrooms in a house, the number of students in a school, the type of things that are occurring in a commercial or industrial district. Those are all calculated and according to the state and EPA requirements. And that's where the design input comes from. That does not mean necessarily that that's actually what's going into it. In the case of Bolton, it's a very small percentage of that in reality. Right now with the schools unoccupied for all intents and purposes, it's very small. As a matter of fact, they're having to artificially put water through it in order to keep it running properly. The way it works is we have a gravity system. Gravity system means basically no pumps that go into septic tanks through big pipes, 8-inch pipes in the schools. And then they go down into what's called a flow equalization tank that basically accumulates a lot of the effluent. And then that gets pumped into the wastewater treatment facility at the rate at which the wastewater treatment facility needs to see it. The town buildings, there are 3 of them that are attached to it, the Public Safety Building, Library, and Houghton Building. They have what is known as a STEP system. That stands for Septic Tank Effluent Pump. And basically it's as simple as each building has a septic tank. And they're tied, the building is tied into the septic tank with a big old septic tank pipe. And then there is a pump that is attached to the septic tank, which drives the effluent, which at this point is, I wouldn't say it's pure water, but there's very, very little solids in it. And it drives it through the 2-inch force main. And that force main ends up behind Emerson School in a big septic tank there. And then it flows with the flow from Emerson and Florence Sawyer down to the flow equalization tank. And by the way, the total design input from town facilities is 2,100 GPD. So what that means in summary is that our wastewater treatment facility is operating at half its capacity,
Okay.
roughly.
Do solids have to be removed by a truck the way our home systems have to be?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
Yep. Yes, they do. They have to be removed at the individual facilities, the town buildings and the schools. And
okay,
they also have to be, they do accumulate in a tank in front of the wastewater treatment facility.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, and here it is.
Yummy.
It's that simple. Okay, so you have the library and public safety building and the Houghton building, and they all dump their stuff into septic tanks. And then the septic from the public safety building and library run through a effluent pump, which is called a grinder pump because it makes very sure that whatever is coming out of it has no significantly sized solid particles. And then it runs through this little 2-inch pipe, which seems amazing, but it works really well.
Boy.
And then it goes to the septic tank at Emerson, and that combines with Florence Sawyer, goes into the flow equalization tank, wastewater treatment facility, and into the leach field that you just described.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the way it all works. And it's now in terms of the individual tanks around the wastewater treatment facility and the internals of the wastewater treatment facility, it's anything but simple.
Right.
Okay. One of the things we're doing along with, I believe everybody else, is we're putting together information in the process of identifying the information for use by town residents. And one of them will be giving more visibility, and as Mark just described, lawn irrigation and water use, which is, again, remarkable when you suddenly see the real numbers. We've done the use and maintenance of septic systems. And what we're looking at is developing something that goes a little bit further and gives you a relatively simple understanding of how the system works, not just what you need to do to keep it working. And then obviously more information on what our existing municipal wastewater system is. And there have been lots of discussions about, wow, why don't we use it for lots of other things that has lots of capacity? And others have said, no, it doesn't have any capacity. The truth of it is that, yes, it has substantial capacity. However, it's 15 years old. And that's one of the things that has been brought up and is an element of regulatory permitting by the DEP. As a matter of fact, next week they're going to be out here. The DEP is going to be out here doing an inspection of the facility because they have had problems with Bolton in the past in maintaining the facility. And then there is what is required as the 15th year engineering assessment, in which there has to be, and that's what Wright Pierce is doing, a very detailed review of the condition of the system, all the major components, as well as the control systems.
Bob,
Would
before you
just a quick
go
question?
on to that, can you go back
Yeah, I
to,
have a quick question. You got the use and maintenance of septic test systems. Do you
Yep.
think you should do the maintenance of wells as well? Some points about how you manage your well, especially
That's a good point. Yeah.
especially if you've got manganese and the best way to stop it from clogging up the well.
Yeah. Yep. That's a really good point. Yep.
Yeah,
We'll look
what
into
I was going to suggest in terms of lawn irrigation, if if all we do is tell them how bad it is to water their lawns, people will glaze over, I think. But I think if we do that, we ought to offer the solutions. which
Oh,
would
that's
be-
definitely part of
yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, there's some discussion of that as well, so.
yeah. Mark has already identified that. And
Yeah, so different kinds of grasses, less grass, more pollinator gardens, those kinds of things.
if you're going to have, again, as I said, shrubs, putting in leak tape irrigation is unbelievably effective.
And
we-
using native plants and not these kind of strange things that builders oftentimes put in, which are not at all native to the area and which require more water than is necessary. So there are positive solutions to this that ought to be part of all of the.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, that ought to lead.
Right. The other thing I would suggest too is that in terms of our recommendations, that it would be, I think, possible, I don't know how to do this, but if we could require realtors to put the care of the septic into the materials given to new owners. We did not know about not putting our water purifier into the septic until we had been here for about 20 years. It's not information that's known. So it needs to be something that newbies get with the houses that they're buying.
No, that's a really great point, and we can certainly do that. It's worse than you mentioned. As the Department of Public Works will tell you, there are people who have called them up and said, my sewer is backed up, get up here and fix it. And they're
My garbage is at the end of my driveway. Why haven't you picked it up?
right.
Yeah.
So they need to understand, that this is a semi-rural area, and we do live with septic tanks, and we do have individual residential wells. And this is what you need to know about all of the above, and how can we help you in minimizing the implications.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
Is there any possibility we can go further with the sprinkler systems and zone them out of existence? I mean, everyone says we're a rural community, and having a lawn watering system is not a rural thing. So, I mean, are there any other towns that ban them, or can we require that they be no new ones made past the ones we have?
I love that.
It's an interesting idea. I have, Mark, can you comment on that? Are you aware of water use? Certainly water use limitations are true, but.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that. I'm not sure how much you can dictate what people do on their own property like that.
But I know, I think on Kettle Hall Road, some of the fancy homes at the very crest, there were issues where the watering was just absolutely ridiculous and made other homes' wells go dry, and they had to re-drill. And you can probably imagine some of the homes I'm talking about at the very crest.
Yeah, I know in at least one case that that happened.
Right.
And part of that comes from being on a shared aquifer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether town council. Well, I mean, actually, yeah, I can look in. I mean, we can look into it, and we can probably put something into place. During a drought that, where wells are being stressed anyway, that we could prohibit them. But I'm not sure as a general rule you could. But we can investigate and find out.
Almost sounds like something the Board of Health would have some leverage for, almost draining the aquifer, impacting the health of citizens and septic and so on, as a board with some authority.
Also, the planning board is, there are things, as you know, that I like to remind us that that climate change is an existential threat, and
Right.
we have to treat it as such. And so we should explore what we can do in terms of mandating responsible behavior.
But I think, Sharon, the Board of Health itself might have more immediate control over a
Yeah.
situation
Yeah,
where a well is
Yep.
run dry, or the water supply, if you will, in the area is run dry by some arrogance of overwatering.
Well,
Mhm.
But I agree with Sharon that, this is something going from now into the future. That,
Agreed, on the future, yes.
really stylistically,
Yep.
we need to be ahead of this and to curb its use. And I don't know if the planning board, in dealing with developers, could, sort of hint to them, if you don't put them in, we will, look more favorably upon you, because I mean, and then if people want to add them later and they have to get a permit from the town, maybe eventually we really discourage that they be put in at all. I mean,
Right.
the
Yeah.
reason I take offense is because I not only see them being used even when there's a drought, I see them in the weirdest places, like down around somebody's outer wall near the road that has pachysandra, or and they're running when it rains. It's just
Absolutely.
like they are
Yeah.
so insidiously bad
Right.
that I just think it's something, when you have a developer developing 8 properties together, they're all going to want to keep up with each other, and therefore, it would really be best if none of them had it.
Right.
It would take away the pressure.
Developers aren't usually the ones who put them in. Except maybe in some of the big developments in some common areas. But I think the planning board might be able to look at encouraging or requiring more, different types of grass. That would be a no-brainer. And then if people's lawns stay green and healthy, they have less incentive to want to put in sprinklers. And some things, we might be able to look at some things like that. I'm not sure that we can. And we can look, and I'll talk to Valerie about seeing what other seeing if other towns have put restrictions in place.
Right. Be worth investigating.
I know in towns that have public water supplies, there they can mandate it, but I'm not sure with private wells if you have the same level of control.
Okay.
Also, it might not be a bad idea to, as at least a first step before you start banning things, is to say, put out something that says, this is how you manage your sprinkler system. You just don't turn it on to, run for 2 hours every other day.
Yeah.
And, sort of good practices. If you're going to have a sprinkling system, at least these are the best practices.
Yeah,
Because
what I put together touches on all of that.
I think
Okay,
too,
so-
is one of the things too is to the degree to which we take on the mantle of being a green community, which we decided we were, that we're talking about some culture changes here. And that's one of the things we should be thinking about is not how, what the legal mechanisms are, how can we coerce people, but how can we invite people to see that they are either living in or moving to a green community that has dedicated itself to living as gently as possible on this good earth. And so it becomes part of town culture as well.
So, there's a graduated way to do this, from suggesting to encouraging to providing incentives to do so to ultimately legislating. So I think, if we can will work, and Mark's the most knowledgeable on this right now, work with climate change and come up with a graduated list of suggestions and then make those part of a long-term recommendation for the appropriate boards or organizations in town. And I'm sure conservation would be very happy to contribute to this in terms of types of species of plantings. You can have differential approaches with using leak takes on your shrubs and planting, you know, more sustainable grasses, et cetera. But there are a whole series of things. Okay, so I think we have an action there.
Yep.
The water and sewer rats will work with the climate change folks, and we'll come up with a series of recommendations with respect to well use and irrigation.
Can
Okay.
Can I ask one more thing about when you were talking about water? Have you considered doing any data collection on problematic water quality and, you know, existence of PFASs like in Harvard, or, you know, any, I don't know, I'm lucky and have a really good well, but do you have any data on people who've had problems with the quality of their water?
Yeah, anecdotally, but we haven't, there's no database that provides that. You have to go talk to the well drillers and the people who work on wells. And to the best of my knowledge, you know, and Dan Gaffney is a perfect case in point. And I'm sure Dan would be willing to have that conversation, but the well drillers as well, who do well maintenance. And the primary thing that has been fed to us anecdotally is the water quality is more of a quantity issue than anything else. And the quality aspect of it is minerals, lots and lots of minerals, and ends up with people putting in water softeners, purifiers, et cetera. So we can get more information, but I don't think, other than getting information on redrilling wells that's available publicly through the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, and individual well drillers, who I'm sure would be very willing to talk to us. And we've already talked to them, but more specifically about the number of wells they've seen as a function of the number of wells, I'm sorry, the number of problems they've seen in types as a function of the number of wells that they've had to repair or redrill. So good point.
I mean,
So
I mean, along
we
that
didn't have
same,
any PFASs. I mean,
No.
I know the Harvard had a big thing where they said they were, well, the press ran an article and it did say, I'll read it to you. Harvard's neighboring towns of Bolton and Stowe have also been selected for the free PFAS testing program. Do you know anything about that?
Nope.
Okay.
Mark?
I vaguely remember seeing something a little while ago, but I don't remember the details.
Well, maybe that's something that we can work with the Board of Health to put out on the web and get out to the community, since
Yeah.
it apparently is not very well publicized.
Yep.
One of the issues with that is that we've learned that if you do have your well tested and it does have PFASs, and they are extremely difficult to get rid of because they're so small, that this remains as public record. And now when you go to sell your house, you have evidence of a contaminated well, which does give one pause.
So I
Yeah.
think
If
it just,
there's nothing you can do about it, what do you do with that knowledge?
so I think if I can just sum up, I'm definitely hearing a lot of need to have kind of a like welcome to Bolton style information source for new residents as well as current residents about well information, water information. I mean, I'm feeling like we're getting pretty into the weeds right now. I don't know how we're doing on time here, Bob,
Way
but if,
late.
yeah, maybe we should just keep moving through the presentation for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but I think in the big picture, we probably need to restart the whole welcome package that used to be provided to people in Bolton. And
Yeah. I agree.
Bolton Local has stopped providing those.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that, it's over.
Move that we adjourn. How's that?
Wow.
Wow.
Well, let's pick the meeting or the date for our next meeting before we adjourn.
Good job, Bob. We like that
Thank
presentation.
you. Thursday, the 22nd of April. How does that sound?
That was in our original minutes that got
Yes,
corrected this evening.
It's Ken's wishful thinking.
Right.
Are we gonna,
All right.
are we gonna have that meeting again?
We are.
Want to
we-
move to adjourn? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I
Well,
make a
Move that
motion.
we adjourn.
Valerie was about to say something, right, Valerie?
Well, I did notice that we had a few other items on the agenda, Bob. I don't know if you did want to move through those.
Well, we're going to have, as I said in the discussion with the preparation of the public forum, we're going to have that conversation with public outreach and communication. And I don't think we need to, I don't think it'd be appropriate to have it here until we have some recommendations. Population statistics, can you send that out, the information from the government on the census?
Yes,
And right now, the game plan is to use the vintage 2020 information as the baseline. And the revised schedule for the overall master plan, I will send that out. And I would like comments on that. Valerie, I sent it to you. I don't know if you took a look at it. But what I'd like to do, and it's way too complicated, but it would be nice to be able to overlay the individual activities on that overall schedule. But one thing I need to discuss with Brian is he is working with Ken and others, Kia, I believe as well, putting together a writers guild who will pull this whole thing together. And we need to understand exactly how that's going to work in terms of its relationship and updating by the individual groups and updating the overall structure that Brian had put together 3 months ago. So we'll work on that and get that back out as well. But that's part and
By the end
parcel.
of this year, Brian will have, or next year, Brian will have written most of the reports that coming out of this town.
Right.
Yeah.
He loves doing it though.
Huh?
He loves doing it.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay, well,
Okay,
I haven't
with
had
that-
dinner yet, so.
Yeah. Do
Are
I
we
hear a
adjourned?
motion?
No, I motioned already, Robert.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Second,
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Time is 8:44, 44 minutes over the allotted
Thank
time.
you
Thank
for
you.
coming, Valerie. Nice to meet you.
It was very nice to meet all of you.
Yeah.
You've already done so much work. It's really great just to hear those updates from each of the task groups. It's super helpful. So I'm definitely getting using this process to learn the town. So so thank you.
Good.
Well, get used to pulling us out of the weeds.
Yeah.
We do
Yeah.
get into
Okay.
the weeds periodically.
Okay.
course,
Good
yeah.
night.
thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Hi, hi,
Bob?
Brian.
Did you want to talk about August Lane for a moment?
Brian, you're just
Bob?
joining us. We just adjourned.
But we announced,
Sorry.
we decided that you're gonna write every report that comes out of the town in the next 5 years.
Well, if you're just, so I know you're just about to adjourn, but can I just mention something really interesting? So I don't know, Valerie, I think you probably already know this, but the Board of Selectmen got another update on the proposed 40B project by the Bolton Manor.
Oh, yeah.
And so I believe that they're going to come back to the Board of Selectmen next month on April 15th and try to get some public comment. But I think if there's anyone from our group that's interested in going to that meeting, they should. So
Is it,
Are they
So-
changing what they originally proposed, Brian, or are they just?
yeah, I'll give you a call. I'll tell you about it later.
so,
Okay.
but is it that they now have essentially two competing large apartment projects on the books?
Yep.
That's ludicrous. I'm
It's
sorry.
gonna
it
be
makes no
a
sense.
lot.
Valerie, just quick question. If the
Pick
town
one.
if the town entered into an LIP for the I'll call it the Bolton Manor, the Condine, whatever, would that allow the town to forestall the Kane project or no?
So Affordable housing is extremely complicated, and I do have to say I have quite limited knowledge, though I've been through the LIP process before. I believe that there is some feeling in town that we would be able to essentially choose, perhaps. You know, if one of those projects is not providing us with adequate information for that first step of the process, but another is, I think that there might be some flexibility. Certainly being way underneath the 10% safe harbor puts the town at risk. But I believe it's the town administrator's feeling that there is definitely some ability to essentially move forward with one project for now.
But to get to our 10%, we wouldn't need both projects. We'd only need one.
Right.
I believe that's correct, right? Because for a rental project, all of the units would count.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
One's plenty. Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Good to
Good
know.
night.
Hi.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Brian.
Give me a call.